Namaskar, friends. We welcome you on behalf of the Raza Foundation and India International Center to this 71st session of an ongoing series called Art Matters. For a long time, we resisted being online. And then, since there was no alternative, we decided to succumb to the temptation. This is the third in the sub series in which we are trying to explore whatever happened to arts and literature in corona times. How have they coped with the difficulties and the inadequacies and the deprivations that have come about, and how it has affected, if at all, their aesthetics, their essential structures of performance or expression. We have four very eminent persons on the channel. The first one, the senior most, is Leela Venkataraman, who is one of the finest and the most well regarded dance critics that we have in this country. Unfortunately, we don't have too many. In fact, the number of dance critics is rather small compared to the number of dance performers and others. And Leela ji has been writing for a long time. She wrote in the Hindu more famously, but she has also done several books, Tradition in Transition, a phenomena called Birju Maharaj, Step by Step Bharatnatyam, Indian Classical Dance, etc. So we are very grateful to Leela ji, who's speaking to us from Chennai. Actually, you would, I hope, not fail to notice that all the four panelists are from four different cities, excluding Delhi. So we have Leela from Chennai now, and then we have Shama Bhate, who has also been collaborating with us in organizing Rohini Bhate dialogues in Pune every year. She has been she runs an institution called Nadroop, and she is one of the important choreographers. She has taken part in many of the famous festivals like Kathak Mahotsav, Savai Gandhar, Bhimsen Mahotsav, Khajuraho Dance Festival, etc. And she has received many awards, Maharashtra Rajya Puraskar, Kundalal Gangani Award, Guru Rohini Bhate Puraskar, etc. Uh, then we have, hopefully, we'll be joined by Sharmila Biswas in a short while. She is one of the leading dancers and choreographers and has been developing and promoting Odissi dance and music working in Calcutta. She has received she is one of the prominent students of Guru Kelucharan Mahapatra, and perhaps some of you would know that we have an annual memorial lecture named after Guru Kelucharan Mahapatra, and Leela ji was kind enough to deliver one of the lectures. Sharmila Biswas has also written a textbook, Knowing Odissi, and a biographical book, Off Stage with Sharmila Biswas. She has received the Sangeet Natak Academy Award for her contribution to Odissi dance. And our fourth panelist is Parwati Dutta, who is the founder and director of Mahagami Gurukul Aurangabad, and who has done remarkable work in promoting and disseminating and provoking critical thought about some of the issues dance faces in terms of tradition and experiment, etc. She is herself a Kathak and Odissi performer, and she has done a lot of choreographic work. She has done a book, Nritya Gatha, and is published in 6 languages, and they have been his writings, research writings, have been published by Sangeet Natak Academy, Bharati Vidya Bhavan, and others. Now, in order to give some kind of a semblance of a structure, uh, I would like to pose a few questions right in the beginning so that you are able to speak around them. You may or may not answer. It is not expected that you will address all the questions, whatever appeals to you and whatever provokes you. The first one is, how has the absence of live performances before responsive audience affected the classical dance practice? The our aesthetics is that the presence of the audience, of the rasika, of the viewer is important. So, and it is part of the art making that a responsive audience is there. Now, its absence, how has it affected? Are the online performances are a possible alternative, or they are merely apadharma and to be given up once the normalcy returns? I mean, I, for one, as an individual person, would hope that this uh, fascination of the online doesn't go so far as to replace the performance, even when the times are better. How has the aesthetics and economics of classical dance affected? Since viewing as close quarters becomes possible online, would there be any lessons learned to be creatively used later when normal time returns? You see, in terms of dance, there are many subtle expressions, many subtle um and complexities which we miss when there is a performance in an auditorium. But online, perhaps you can view them. Now, does that make any difference, or would this continue in some sense? Accompanists have been hit badly. Do you think that public institutions should have done a lot more in this unprecedented crisis? Raza Foundation last year, after the first national lockdown, did provide monthly financial assistance to a large number of people, but our resources are limited. So we cannot do this. And I tried to persuade some philanthropists to do something, not to much success. Anyway, so these are the issues, and maybe we should start. And the rules of the game is each one should take about 10 to 12 minutes in the beginning, and then maybe you could have a conversation between yourselves, and then if there are any questions, you may like to address them. Welcome, Sharmila ji. You have joined in the meantime.
I'm so sorry. I'm so
Namaskar.
sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right. And when somebody is speaking, the others have to unmute their. This is one simple thing that I have learned, which I didn't know myself very well. And maybe start with Parwati Dutta. Parvati.
Namaste. I was hoping you would follow the same order and you would ask Leela ji to
No, no,
begin.
no.
So,
It will go the other way around now.
all right, all right. So, how should I begin? Do you wish that I should first answer with one of the questions or something, or should I just proceed with
Whatever. Yeah. Whatever you think appropriate.
All right, all right. So,
Yeah.
namaste, everyone. Namaste, greetings, and it's a very interesting topic about which I think all of us have been discussing and also introspecting and reflecting. So, to my understanding, I think the dance community was already in the crossroads. We were already taking advantage of the technology. We were trying to explore many things, right from the time when the microphones and the stage lights were invented. I think dancers kept on experimenting and adapting to how technology is bringing newer possibilities with respect to presentation art. And in the past 2 decades, I suppose there has been a lot of engagement with technology. So that ways, to begin with, I have a feeling that many dancers were not too uncomfortable thinking of a gadget and looking through a lens or looking through a small monitor because they had already started engaging themselves into this kind of discourse or discussion and sharing content, making dance performance a digital content. But that time, I think we were not aware that this is going to be the only way of sharing. So, as far as my work is concerned, I had not explored this area. I had never done a Facebook Live earlier. Many artists did start doing this. But I remember 2020 Sharang Dev Samaroh in Mahagami was in the blended format. So some of the lectures and paper presentations in the afternoon section of the seminar did have paper presentations from dancers or dance researchers from other countries. And that time it was quite a welcome thing that, yes, why not bridge this geographical barrier and why not have a more engaging discussion with thinkers from across the globe. I was also looking forward to this kind of working very closely with thinking people from various places. But what Corona, this pandemic and the restriction brought for us was newer challenges. Uh, Immediately, as you also raised this question with respect to musicians and accompanists, that was, of course, one area of concern. And for institutions, it was quite a challenge because for soloists or artists who've been freelancers, they started inventing and they started adapting and being more creative with what all they could do. But when it is an institution, there are some responsibilities with respect to how you would take care of them, how you would manage and sustain the creative work without diluting it, how you would reach out. For me, reaching out to the students who are not living in places where there is internet facility or a good bandwidth, some of them are from the rural regions. It was the immediate challenge that was faced by us. But the larger picture of dance looked a little disillusioned, and there was this immediate voices that I was listening to was that artists from various parts, especially the younger generation, they somehow felt shattered and they felt that they were entitled to performances because they have invested so many years of learning and I mean, we made difficult choices in our lives and we wanted to become dancers and performers. So that was where I had a lot of questions in my mind also, that do we call our art form, our chosen art form, only a performing art? Or do we say that it is an art form which is also performed, or a prayoga dharmi kala? So if we are also looking at the knowledge component of this art form, the pedagogy, the innovative part, the process, the laboratory work, or the research component, then I think artists will find themselves more satisfied with what they are doing. What was happening, to my understanding, was we were giving too much of attention to the performance part, and we were not paying so much attention into building a piece with the help of musicians, or building a piece with dialogue, with close dialogue with visual artists probably, or poets, or thinkers, or shastrakaras. So this pandemic and this restriction immediately brought opportunities for such artists to start thinking about how they can build work that was in their mind, and if they can take this further through discussion and conversation online, through any medium that they may have chosen. Another thing was also to examine what is happening in the field of digital world. We were not quite aware of it. Other than social media and emailing or website, I think many of us had not actually explored what all is there, has been invented or discovered, and is shareable and is being shared. So I, under the aegis of Mahagami Gurukul, I started having these webinars on artificial intelligence and examining how this can this assist an artist? Can this be of some use, especially when you don't have access to people around you, when you're not able to work one-on-one with someone? So these are areas where I will not say that we must pay more attention, but it's, building our emotional profile for crisis management, or being more adaptive with respect to whatever comes our way. Um, with the dance performances that we were observing since a while, I was feeling little concerned about the nuances and the micro movements, or the bariki, and the depth, or the depth with respect to exploration and depiction, and the speed, of course, can it be little more internalized and little more fluid. So these were areas that were of sometimes of concern. And we've all started realizing that dancing for the lens is little different. It doesn't quite encourage a dancer to keep on doing the footwork or too much of fast movements. I think more fluid movements with more content with respect to building emotive narratives, or a good sahitya, or good a very inspiring theme could be a more interesting way to approach, instead of just depicting, just showcasing your prowess. So these are the immediate observations that came in my mind. And also I've discovered that there's been a surge of online lecture series and interactions with artists. I also initiated quite a few lectures and online workshops on, ranging from Natya Shastra to Drupad to discussing about various aspects. So all this was, I think, very much required for dancers to also continuously look at how they can nourish their intellect and imagination. So that nourishment somehow began. Something slowed down, something was put on pause, and so each one was trying to listen to the other voice, was also trying to um, uh, view or witness their work, their body of work, and if possible, comment on that or appreciate it. Or so there was this bonding, or this feeling of coming together and sharing thoughts, brainstorming together. Many dancers and guru, I also realized that we're working on building a new vocabulary, building a new zone of creative work. I also attempted quite a few of those, and I started sharing with little hesitation initially. I started sharing with my students, and they gradually started adapting and learning the nuances as far as possible, and then showing it to me, sharing with me. Um, and the last thing that I would like to share over here is um, we've all been dancing for various reasons, probably, or we all started learning dance with various ideas, or maybe they were inspirations or life changing moments, something. And in the course of learning and sharing or performing, there have been many questions that have always occurred in my mind. One of those has been, what could be the role of dance? So, of late, we've been observing that dance is, or culture, I would say, is more connected to tourism because we have a lot of festivals happening, and immediately the showcase part is highlighted. And probably dance becomes an important um, stream to look at global relations, diplomatic relations, and so on. But what was still lesser explored was dance as an important medium to connect with people, social upliftment and social development, or maybe personality development, an important component in education, um, and how dance can help us become better human beings, better global citizens. So these were areas that was not at all addressed, or not even something that was identified to be discussed and taken into the discourse of dance education. We were often being seeing that learning dance also leads us towards this kind of a competitive world where we don't acknowledge the energies that are inherent in the art form, which may not be a measurable outcome or an output of this, but at the same time, it helps in building a better society, creating better global citizens. So, can dance help us think as elated human beings and not as Anthropocenes? Was something that came in my mind. So let me close with all these thoughts immediately that came in my mind, and let me also listen to the other panelists. Thank you. Ashok, you have to unmute yourself.
Shama Bhate.
I want to read what I want to say because I have insights and perspective. I want to thank Raza Foundation and Ashok Ji for this opportunity to express my views on this relevant and important subject. And I'm truly honored to be part of such a prestigious panel. All of us have gone through a tough time because of the pandemic. For a while, one absolutely dumbfounded, hoping for solutions to come on their own. What is an artist supposed to do, especially a dancer who cannot practice at home in residential area? Practice in front of the store? A teacher who cannot have students coming to school, teach online? A creative person who has no approach to the musicians to interact, meet on Zoom? No auditorium, no programs, do the dancers and perform in dingy places and be happy that Facebook and Instagram will take care of the rest. The artists were left staring at a gaping hole. Can the digital space fulfill everything that an artist strives for? Everyone was compelled to do all of that willingly or unwillingly. Each of us soon learned how to teach a student in a very colorless, odorless, indifferent space, and to take care of bothersome technical hazards as well. One suddenly had plenty of time at one's disposal. One just had to utilize it to think ahead and to look back. Be proactive to make things happen. The internet was a godsend. One could listen to all music styles. One could study Tulsidas, Surdas if one wanted. One could listen to many interviews to get a peek into the vast experience of all-time greats. I mean, one could sharpen one's wits, gain hold of information, and look for new openings and avenues. But then there was a void too. No audience, no lights, no pulsating music. One had to look at the digital space in hope to turn a challenging situation into an opportunity of new aspirations, dreams, possibilities. Being a stage artist, one never really had perceived one's dance through a camera lens. The question was, will that outlook bring a new perspective to one's understanding and therefore to the presentation? Will that help broaden the scope of the form? My generation has seen many transformations in Qatar when the intelligent lights and advanced sound systems arrived. When a stage setting was carefully chopped out for holistic aesthetic experience, as compared to the bare stage setting, basic sound systems with only halogen lights for illumination. I believe Kathak looks gorgeous and beautiful in its new avatar, with all its possibilities, potential nicely explored, yet firmly rooted in its traditional classical values. Digital space probably is another step forward into technology. One could now look at the form from all directions, angles, planes, dimensions, lateral, top, diagonal, height, and of course, frontal. The dancers themselves never looked at their dance form from top or lateral angle. It was a given that the audience was watching the dance from the front. Would the dance get a multi-layered dance look if shot from various angles, directions, and speeds? If achieved, would it give an intriguing, attractive, effective space activation? Would the technology open up another vista, bringing a new aesthetic experience to the presentations? I think yes. I'm fully aware that the costs of such production could be astronomical, but I'm talking about the scope of artistic possibilities. I have great faith in the strength and potential of Tata. An ever optimistic person that I am, I always want to look at the positive side of the situation. In any case, we know that the huge festivals or productions are always supported by sponsorships. I've never seen any show generating the amount of money it really requires. In that sense, the economics of classical music and dance industry is not sorted as yet. I'm sure that our dance forms with their inherent strength would stand their ground on the international platforms, would compete with the rest of the world if they could be viewed, conceived, and presented with the new perception of on digital space. I believe that even after normalcy returns, the digital presentation is here to stay. We will need to accept the digital space as the next norm of modern life and make the most of it by turning that into an Ishtapatti, just like everyone had to adapt choreographic and solo formats together, institutionalized training and workshops together with Guru Shish Parampara. I remember a lot of debates from my childhood. The people were wary that the advent of cinema will destroy the theatre, which it did not. My generation discussed and was afraid if the television would hamper the cinema and theatre. Would people even opt to go out to theatres if they got everything in the comfort of their homes? In spite of this genuine concern, both theatre and cinema survived and prospered. The TV programs can never be the all-time substitute for shared experiences of joys and sorrows and life vibrations of human beings. I urge my young friends to make our solid Kathak DNA compatible to the new platforms of web series and OTTs. The plays that form along with the dancers would become redundant in the coming years if we do not go with the technology to enhance and reinvent our strong inheritance of classical dance. Solo format is close to every dancer's heart. It provides scope for self-expression, for improvisation, an opportunity to look at the depths and the vastness of the tradition, to seek one's identity. The proscenium platforms on the festival scene are huge. The audience is in thousands, and there is a fear of a single dancer getting completely. Demand then naturally is for a group choreography. In order to reach the huge audience, the dancers need to remold their dance at the cost of the nuances and intricacies. In a digital space, probably there is a fear of losing vitality and the throbbing spirit, but if explored cleverly, probably the nuance could be visible, and in turn, that the dancers would be compelled to work on the subtleties like the old heart, the rhythm complexity, the musicality of footwork, the depth of emotion, the rich literary content, all of which make Kathak rich and unique. The Mayfil dance could be probably restored to some degree. Of course, without the wahwahis and ahas from the audience, there is no doubt that the upajama or the improvisation will suffer. But in any case, on a huge stage, with the time constraints, there are very few artists who really have the improvisation at the core. The fact remains that ideally, the dancer needs audience participation for the performance to grow, glow, and to bring out the best in. I'm sorry to say this, but I feel that no government agencies, no corporate sector, no business houses, no civic bodies, no NGOs had empathy or compassion for them. The artist community helped a little. I know some foundations like Raza Foundation or Maitra Foundation also helped, but that was not enough. I know the folk artists in Maharashtra have walked miles and miles just for a ration of few kilos. It certainly is an unorganized sector with no hope of a savior. I wonder why this apathy when we never tire of singing praises of our ancient art and culture. Are the artists mere entertainers? Don't they have right to live there with self-respect when they work hard to get proficiency in their chosen field? Are the arts so superfluous that they can be left in a lurch? Isn't art the conscience of the society on one hand and the soul on the other? I would like to conclude by saying that it is the quest that keeps the fire in an artist alive. I believe this is the time when the dancers have an added, unknown, unexplored area to tread on, which is the digital space. Thank you. Namaskar.
Well, Leela ji, the two dancers and choreographers who have spoken seem to have given a somewhat optimistic uh, picture of the situation, taking the challenges that have come up, being converted into opportunities, and for a new way of looking at dance in terms of the global connections that could be made, in terms of critical thinking that it can promote, etc. So, what are your thoughts on this, please, Leela ji?
Unmute, Leela ji, unmute yourself.
Leela ji, please unmute yourself.
I have unmuted myself.
Now it is okay.
Yeah. No, there was this great musician who said that it was necessary for all households to buy a tanpura and teach all their little children music. Because he said, जो स्वर के खोज में लग जाता है, वो कभी आतंकवाद नहीं बनेगा. Because this brings out really the sensitive part of a human being, and that has got to be developed. We are always talking about competition in all fields and things that people should master and forge forward in this world. But we never think of the things that are softer, that can appreciate life, that can bring sympathy to it, that can make everything look so completely different with the eyes of a beholder who sees the foibles in others, but accepts that that's part of mankind and thinks of ways of bringing people together. I think art is one of those things. But somehow in our country, it has always, we talk about art, we talk about culture, but this is the lowest rung of the ladder of preferences as far as economy of the country is concerned. Nobody is bothered. And during this COVID situation, I thought some of the artists suffered so badly. I wondered what the government was doing and why it was not coming forward to help these people. But I do blame the artists also to a certain extent. I think the art crowd has to get together. They have to form a strong lobby asking for certain rights along with the duties which they perform. Unfortunately, this is not happening. People are pulling in different directions. Now, you're talking of technology. I think it is Mr. Vajpayee who said that he gave in to temptation of technology and said, why not do something? I don't think it's a question of temptation today. It's necessity. Technology has invaded our lives in a way where we can't possibly escape it. And everybody talks of online teaching. I was one of those who was brought up thinking that the teacher and the student being in contact, physical contact with each other every now and then was absolutely essential for dance, particularly when you're talking of the body, because you sit down, you stand the wrong way, and the guru gives you one on the back and says, straighten your back. Or he says, keep your Aramandi position all right, see that your knees bend sideways and not forwards. And he says, hold the back straight. And the posture, everything is corrected by hand movements. And when the guru gets angry, how often have we not seen gurus fling their little rulers, which fall straight on the ankle of the feet of the disciples who are not keeping proper timing? And now, without the physical contact, you are trying to teach dance to youngsters. I think it's very difficult. And I have been a party to some of this online teaching. And I feel that there is always a fraction of a second difference in the sound reaching the other spot from one place to another. So particularly when you're teaching something like Tal, and we are so particular about the fractional intervals of a beat, and we said this is exactly Adha Matra kam ho gaya. We say, in Carnatic music, we say, Kal Matra koranju pet. 1/4 of a Matra was less. Now, if we are going to look at the mathematical exactitude in which we split time and look at Tal, how are you going to teach this on the internet? I find it very difficult. Online teaching, I have seen, it's very difficult to teach children like this. Yes, Abhinaya you can teach. Because I think the minute expressions get lost on a stage, on a large stage, and very often people are not able to see it if they are seated beyond the fifth row or the sixth row. So if you want to teach Abhinaya, you can teach through the camera. It is very good for that. I mean, you can't give them items and say, do it exactly like this, but you can tell people how you can expand on a particular idea, how you can weave permutations and combinations like around a particular line, and how you can do Abhinaya. I think you can certainly teach. And for the teaching medium, is internet is very good. I think the talks are excellent. We have been performing a little too much. The feverish pace at which people have been performing all the time, I think they haven't waited even to get their batteries recharged. So it's time for a little reflection. Quiet. Look into yourself and see what your relationship is with the art form. Where am I going? What am I doing? Is this something I really want to do? And is it this way that I want to do it? And I think there's been some forced solitude which has made people look into themselves a little more, which we never did. And some of the talks I found very interesting. For instance, this entire session on Guru Kundan Lalji, there was a discussion which I think Prerna Shrimali had arranged, and there were about 30 to 35 students of his who spoke, all senior students, and the junior ones were also there. And there was so much of information that came out. At the end, the idea was that they should bring out a book with all the matter that had come out in this particular session, because very little is known about the method in which this guru taught people. We know he was a great Jaipur Gharana guru, but how exactly he taught, very few people talk about it. And the amount of information which came out in that particular session really surprised me. Now, some of the sessions like that, I think, have been highly rewarding. But otherwise, I think we know that technology is here to stay. We have to understand technology. I remember once talking to Merce Cunningham, the great Western modern dancer, and he told me, he said, every time he saw what he had choreographed being presented on the stage, he was so disappointed. He said, on the stage, it looks so wonderful. Why is it that when you show it on TV, it looks absolutely dreadful? So the cameraman asked him to stand behind the camera and have a look at what was happening. And it was then that he realized that the camera lens looks at movement very differently. It's not like the naked eye looks at it. And that is why when you're using this internet and you're trying to present something, you can't present your usual margam, the usual way you try and do a varnam on it. I can't watch for more than 10 minutes. Very frankly, it is impossible. You will have, because here the camera is there, it is going to tell its own story. How are you going to, without breaking the style and the grammar, make use of this technology in a way which is really friendly and which aids the performance? I think it's a very, very big challenge. And this is something that people will have to learn how to do. Recently, I thought it was a wonderful festival. It was held by Sampradaya Creations in Montreal. Lata Pada, she had sponsored. It was ideationally, it was her idea. And then, they had commissioned works, and they had chosen dancers from 4 different styles from India. And they asked them to project something, and it was so beautifully done. She said, reflections in solitude. Now, what can you do with what you have? It has to go beyond the ordinary thing that you are doing every day. I don't want the same thing. And yet, please do not break the grammar or the classical style. Let it be there. But within that, can you do something different? Can you think out of the box? And I think some of the program which came, I was absolutely bewitched when I saw the whole thing. First was Vijayini Satpathy, who said she was having a midlife crisis because as a person who had always been the main dancer in a big institution, she had suddenly come to she had stepped into the solo field. And she was now wanting to do her own choreography. And she took a Nazrul Islam song, which was in Ahir Bhairav. And the entire program was in Ahir Bhairav, just one rag. And she said, it should not sound repetitious and the movements should not be repetitive. And it was the whole Odissi thing. And she built the entire plot around this one thing, whereas a girl is looking at an abstract something and of Shiva, and she thinks suddenly of the Ardhanarishwara. And she says how the male and the female, they are such opposites, and yet they complement each other, and they are not against each other. And she kept on thinking in this line, and then she put in 2 lines of her own, where Shiva proposes and says, will you marry me? And the girl says, no, you are too overbearing. You're too strong for me. I go for the charming Krishna. And then she had the Pallavi, which came as the sweetness of expectation. That is what she said the Pallavi meant. And it was very beautifully done. That was in the same raga. And the whole thing looked so new, but it was Odissi. And then she made use of the fact that you have the chauka on the one hand and you have the tribhanga on the other hand. One is a very masculine stance, if you want to call it that way. And the tribhanga, of course, is full of sensuality. So he said, bring the 2 together. And she gave an absolutely beautiful performance. Then Rama Vaidyanathan, she thought of changing boundaries. And we are always changing boundaries when you come to think of it. Because as you keep on aging, the body doesn't accommodate what it used to do a few years back. So your boundaries are automatically changing. You are negotiating all the time. And so she took that. Boundaries are always being crossed. But at the same time, we are anchored in a particular style. Let us not get out of that style. But within that, there is a lot of freedom. And there were no words in the song. It was only raga and it was tanam. And it was, that kind of singing where there's a lot of freewheeling. And the dance, she took these little syllables to which you have set movements. And she showed each in so many different ways of Bharatanatyam. It was Bharatanatyam. And there she imagined herself as a kite flying in the sky, a bird which is flying in the sky, and so many other things. The waves which are coming from the sea and back, up and down. And then she says the whole world is in a dance. And in this dance, there is a lot of elation, there's a lot of freedom. But at the same time, it's all within certain rules. It's anchored. And that anchoring is what our Tayari gives us. So let us be anchored. But with that anchoring, let us try and see if we can fly all over. And then somebody else came out in the Mohini Attam. There was Ahalya, not the usual Ahalya. She took a couple of couplets from Valmiki Ramayana. And there when he talks about Ahalya, it's just a natural woman. It's so completely non-judgmental. Here is this woman who's got a husband who believes that any physical relationship should not be unless he's going to procreate a child. Otherwise, there's no need for any physical relationship. So she's absolutely starved of love. And when Indra looks at her beauty and comes, she knows very well it is Indra. It's not as if she doesn't know who it is. She knows, but she gives in. She gives in to her sensuality. And then she's cursed by the husband. And not, he doesn't turn her into a stone, but Valmiki says, you will not be perceived by the rest of the world for so many years. He says, Vayu Bhaksham Aharam. You'll only live on air and nothing else for so many years. And then when Rama comes, he'll come and give you salvation. And then when God Ram comes, there's again no judgment. He says, here is a wonderful woman, and he brings her back to life. And when she comes out, she says, the woman who had given in to her desires also becomes the woman who goes deep inside and says, let me find myself. She said, let me find the Ramatvam within me. That is what this Mohiniyattam dancer said. It was so beautifully done. No, and then there was Aditi Mangaldas, who did something in Kathak, which was beautiful. She said, all are Nav mein Nadi. You see, is it the Nadi in the Nav or Nav mein Nadi? What is happening? All our narratives have been stolen. And she used the stage beautifully. Here were a whole lot of beautiful golden frames all over, empty inside. There was nothing. There were only the frames. And within that, she says, the world is dark. What is real? What is unreal? And then there is the little deer which is looking at the moon in the sky and looks at the reflection of the moon in the water and says, is that real or is this real? So what has happened to our life? All our narratives have been stolen. We need new narratives. How are we going to look at the dance in new ways? I think we have to do it. There is no question. And people will have to think. Just doing pair ka kaam karna, ye karna, wo karna, it's all beautiful. I don't say no. But you can't keep on with the same thing. You will have to think and see how you can relate with the dance in a way where you involve the contemporary sentiments, when you bring people to you, and it is very different. And I think maybe this is going to be the opportunity for doing that kind of thing. Some people have started doing it. A lot of them haven't. I feel very sorry for the less well-off artist who has suffered so badly during this time. It's unbelievable to think that art, which gives you so much dignity, artists who have lived with so much passion and dignity, should come to a state where they literally have to beg. And this is not the way a nation should treat its artists. I think it is very, very essential that that is something which is remembered by every one of us. And I think larger institutions, people who are better off, every month you have to buy something. There has to be some kind of a fund which looks after these people during times of stress. Otherwise, we'll just be talking about art and our culture, and it has no meaning whatsoever. And I think art is a wonderful way of getting to know other people, and it's a wonderful way of corresponding and getting people all over this world to come together, understand their art, because it is something which doesn't make you belligerent, which doesn't put one against the other. You go to economics, you go to religion, you go to politics, you go to anything, it always brings about enemies. Art is one thing that can win you friends. And I think through dance, you can do a lot. And I think also society, you can do a lot of things for drug relief, for handicapped children. We had Astad Dibu, who was doing such extraordinary work for the blind, for handicapped children, and for others. And I'm so sorry that he is no longer with us, because here was a man who was a real benefactor to society, and he wanted to do with good with his art. And I think that feeling of art, not as self, but art, something which we can share, with which we can make a better place of this world, has got to come. And I maybe that these problems will make us think on those lines and proceed on those lines. I'm very hopeful.
Thank you, Leela ji. And now, Sharmila Biswas. Sharmila ji.
Namaskar. I think I would like to come back or address um, directly the questions
Yes.
or the points, raised by Ashok ji. What I've been thinking about those, the reflections, simple, is the first one was, that when the live audience is not there, how it is affecting us, the performers. See, the negative effects we all know already. There's nothing for me to, yes, I don't want to repeat myself. Financially, I think the most severest, the hit, most severely was, I think, the accompanists and the freelance dancers who would be dancing from one place to another. They were performing to earn. There was nothing for them. And it yet really, there was absolutely zero. That's what I see. And they don't know any other skill to support them, not even teaching. Uh, Emotionally, that's I think it's negative, and I think it gives rise to something positive when the dancers start thinking that if I cannot perform, why should I practice daily? So it makes it made all the dancers very introspective, including my students, my senior students, because we are all under the illusion that we are dancing because we love dance. Is that correct? Or we are somewhere, looking for that limelight. So if we are not performing on stage, dance doesn't mean anything to us. So that question they had to face, they had to ask, and I've seen people kind of moved on. And I'm very happy to see that they could ask themselves those hard questions. And those who stayed back, they discovered again and again that it was not the performances, even the young dancers, it's not keeping us, it's something else. And it's the journey of the something else which is happening now. That's the positive part for me, the most positive thing. For myself personally, working for the first time after so many years without a deadline, let me tell you, I'm not missing performances. I mean, I'm being selfish, call me whatever it is, but to work without deadlines, to work for the sake of work, my God, I mean, it's something fantastic. And I'm so fortunate that I can afford it. I mean, somehow managing to afford it. And you see, it also is making me think what kind of dance I would be doing. Before that, I mostly it's a half thoughts, and then okay, time to perform, time to go on. So it's always rush. So now I know I can actually honestly answer the question what kind of dance I would like to do after comes back to normal. So for me, that is like a blessing, I would say. Then coming to the virtual, classroom where I am interacting with my students who live in my own city. Uh, of course, as Leela mentioned, it's a crazy thing about the tal, the technique, and all that. So every day we are innovating new ways to deal with that. There's no easy or simple way. Frustrating. But those frustrations are giving us ways also. Abhinay is simpler, yet it is not so simple because in between, okay, we are sharing our expressions. That's the angic part of the expression. Ah, how my cheeks move and all that. What about the emotion somewhere is, is tough. I cannot even explain in words. So we all know it. So there's nothing. We are all, facing this on a daily basis. But again, if I talk about the positive sides, as I feel as teachers in a classroom, we are always looking for the physicality of the dance. to build the dancers technically and all that. I never paid so much attention to that girl standing at the back, who is a slow learner, but she can create, she can write, she can recite poetry. My juniors, children are learning to put the bindi, Odissi way, because the dance class has become a multiple action class. They are in the or internet, they are learning to make the Odissi Jura, all those things. So, and I'm discovering so many parts. In my class, it was the top front are the heroines who can dance very well, and others are following. And in the box, you cannot see the person next to you. So they have to be self-reliant. And I am so fortunate to find out those qualities in dancers whom I would kind of give up. Why do you dance at all? Yes, they can dance. And they are finding different ways of making it work for them, even financially. Hmm. So that is my thing. About coming to the second question, is it an apadharma? That one, we all know that the virtual medium is here to stay, along with live shows. Now, if I come to the positive sides, again, we know about the virtual medium, the reach, and the fact that if we have a good performance, it stays, it's documented. So it's not that moment, one moment on stage and beautiful performance, that's all. And a video camera is not capturing it. Video of the dance, it's not capturing those sensitive moments, but the camera can capture in a way, more intense way, whatever. Learning new skills, which in case we had to learn, as we all, Parvati has spoken, that it is a process and it is good. But the worry, what really worries me about this is that when our eyes and audience eyes, we are looking at dance, the eyes are capturing the entire dance, but effortlessly also capturing the point, the focus, whether it's mudra at one point, whether it's the eyebrow or the footwork. So we are seeing the entirety of the dance, and the camera, our eye, is focusing what they need to focus, and the focus is changing throughout the dance. But the camera eye, as Leela ji says, is very different. And it is also very easy, isn't it, to be manipulative with our camera lens? Yes, it is.
It is.
The saddest part. The saddest part is my footwork is bad. I can't spin very fast. So what? I cannot sustain my energy. So what? My camera will take care of all that. So my arms are lovely. So let's focus on that. So that worries me, really worries me, because is it going to be do we want it to be turned into an art for people who have lots of resources? They can manipulate the dance. I don't want to resources. I don't mean financial resources, mental resources to think of these tricks, the clever dancers. No, I want foolish dancers. I want stupid dancers. I want dancers who can only dance with their full body. So that worries me, that where will it be? We have already gone through a huge transition in the 40s when we came to this black box. Now, coming to the black box, we come to the aesthetics and economics of dance, the changes. What was the transition? I mean, I know all the great things happened in the 40s, when we it was a transition from the court dancers, from the temple dancers, very, very cloistered, to open. Yes, Who will deny that? But don't we all know that we have lost two things? I feel. Maybe there are others. For my mind, one thing is the content of the dance. So it was black box and 1,000 people to start with. The intimacy was lost, so that technically the dance changed. Huge loss, I feel, for solo classical dancers. So multiple bodies, etc., designs, this and that. So that design has become so multiple stadium dances and all that. So it is changing. I'm not saying that that kind of dance doesn't have a right to live, but then we have not thought of transition in terms of space, creating space, intimate space for dances. But Natya Shastra is full of those ideas which could have been done, but we do have black boxes because the Westerners have black boxes. Ballet, what I'm sorry, I mean their dances, it's a different thing. So we have lost. We lost out very badly. I'm going to be very, very honest because in these days we have to be honest. That when classical dance and music was made free for everybody to come and see, nobody thought of the economic impact it will have. Because those days, even the Kochi dancers, none of the dancers, it had an economic thing. If you dance well, you'll earn it. If you don't, you have vanished. So that balance was totally robbed out of us. So now we are suffering from it. We all know it. So coming to the now, that was a transition. So I felt more thoughts could have saved us from certain, saving the dance form and the dancers, aesthetically and economically. Now we are facing the same situation, aesthetics and economics. See, angik, vachik, ahari, everything changes when the medium changes. So the question is, we have to deal with it, we have to change or perish. There's no other option for us. So I'm just telling the problem whether we want to change or can change. People perish like dinosaurs, like I may perish like that. Well, that's also a fact. Uh, uh, Now, economics, coming to it, as we all know, that camera as a media, it has, okay, we know that so much scope and all that, but it's a very expensive work. Now it becomes more expensive when I see when I think from the perspective of the young dancers, then they see a fantastic work, probably lakhs and rupees. It talks about technology, huge technology. Huh? And the dancers are thinking, oh my God, we can never get it, so we will never be able to do it. Why think of technology? Make the technology simple. Let us do it for the virtual dance. Let it be a simple technology where the dance comes out more. So let us try to figure out how to do it. Let us try to figure out ways and means to make it a simple one camera affair, not a 10 camera affair, not a fancy light and all that affair. Where let's find ways to make the dance important, not the shot important. So we have to think, we have to work on it, I feel, so that this transition doesn't become like the previous transition. We come to this transition with the best qualities of the previous ones and move on. Now, see, the thing is, the another question, Ashokji, were very nice. I thought that, when online in a thing, close-ups can happen, the intimacy can happen. So will we learn anything from it? I hope the thing we learn from it to make the audience and the dance come closer Let us appreciate that. Let us from the virtual medium see, oh, dance can look like this. So if let us go and have a smaller, thing, not a 2000 capacity. So we are missing out on something. We missed out all these years. We missed out. Now the camera is making us see that we will have it. So I wish the black box and stadium will be less, and that intimacy. Now, talking about, I'm ending in a minute. The talking about the support. I can only say, our country with the complexities and all that. Okay, we can go on as artists. I feel we can go on blaming, but meanwhile, the life has to go on. So when I think about this thing, the one thought comes to my mind is the village musicians I have met. For the livelihood, they farm. For that's what Leela ji so beautifully described. That softer thing in the evening is kept for dance. Somehow I feel if we could find a balance between, working. I'm not talking about 9 to 5 jobs. We dancers need to be artists. We need to be innovative to find a way where we are comfortable, we are secure with some income coming from some other source. We used to call in Odisha calling bell dancers. That means you are so hard up that you are doing door to door tuition. I can give you one example which made me so happy in this pandemic situation. One theater person who was full time theater, everything coming from theater, when there was nothing for him suddenly, and he was not a teacher or anything, teaching theater, no other source. You know what he did? He he started, understanding the business of selling fish. He said, I'm so happy. I learned a new work. I would do it in the morning and finish everything by 9. And the rest of the day, I am actually now doing theater for first time in my life. I know it is that example cannot work for everybody, but I think this is the time for us to be innovative and then beat this. Our government cannot do all that what we need right now. We need to do ourselves. I don't know what else to say, but this is what I
Did
was
you
thinking.
see? Did you see the recent the seasons through the window? Did you see that?
No, no,
It was a very
no.
beautiful thing where
Mm.
students with their little cell phones
Mm-hmm.
were asked by Aditi to look at
Mm-hmm.
the season just through the window
Uh-huh.
and do what they want by way of dance. So they had their little cell phones,
Mm.
and it was very beautiful. There was one boy
Mm.
who showed spring
Uh-huh.
and as a dancer, and
Uh-huh.
only the torso
Uh-huh.
looking out
Uh-huh.
of the window, and he sees spring coming and everything is blooming, and
Mm.
he's thinking of meeting his beloved,
Mm.
and only this much of him is acting, nothing else. And I thought it was so brave of a boy to try doing that, a male dancer, using the just the and in Kathak particularly, the virtuosity aspect is so attractive that everybody goes in for something which really is sizzling footwork and so on. Nothing, no footwork at all, only the torso being used. And I thought it was one of the most beautiful things I saw. And another person dancing on the terrace in the midst of all the crotons and the
Mm.
plants, and suddenly everything is green at the back, but there is a little bit of brown which comes, and he shows through a poem that in the midst of life we are living with death, because the dry leaf comes and falls down. He looks at all this greenery, and he looks at this the leaf that has died, and he says, my God, the green there and the death here, they're side by side. He's looking at it all the time. And there is a poem which says this: I thought it was so beautifully done. It is all just students with their little phones who are doing this and making these connections. Now, I think here you see that necessity has made them really look inwards and produce something that is very interesting. And I think this kind of introspection can lead to something which is very good.
Yes, I trust.
Yeah. Would you like to, anybody else like to make any comments? Parvati, Shamaji?
Yes, well, thank you, Shobji. There are many thoughts. I mean, during this pandemic, for the first time, Sangeet Natak Academy was sharing all its archival collection with the viewers, which I thought was such a gift,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
all these years we used to, sort of struggle with, access to archival information and viewing the recordings and all these valuable documented work which remained with Sangeet Natak Academy, and there was a huge hierarchical process to have access to something like this. Whereas I think this was the main purpose of archiving. I feel as a student and as a learner, this should have been accessible to each and every learner living in not just the capital cities and but the non-metropolitan cities like Aurangabad and even the rural places. So many years back, I remember that when I was sort of doing a small in-house seminar with my students, and I had given them a lot of topics to discuss and think about. And some of them chose about creative expressions within their own chosen dance forms. And then they were looking for content and references, and they didn't find much. And it was only through the information that I was able to share with them that, I saw this, and Maharajji had once done this kind of he had, explored this kind of a theme, or Kumi Ben had done something like this. So it was only a kind of imagination that was there in their mind, because they had not seen those works. They had not seen all those productions and all those creative expressions. They had not seen archival recordings. So one gift which artists got was, especially the younger dancers, they got to see the archival recordings. So that has brought a different dimension. As I mean, they are able to navigate through the world, the dance world, in a different way. Their imagination is richer. That is one thing that I feel is quite good. And I also look back and think that I keep wondering that why were our gurus not allowing institutions to document their performances.
Yeah.
I quite vividly remember that when I began my work in Mahagami some 25 years back, many of the gurus were not so willing to have their performances recorded, video recorded. In fact, कहते थे कि नहीं बस 2 मिनट वीडियो चालू होना चाहिए, लाल बत्ती दिखी तो हम नहीं नाचेंगे. तो अब जाके हमको उसका महत्व समझ में आ रहा है कि डॉक्यूमेंटेशन इज सो इम्पोर्टेंट. वी हैव टू नो कि हर दशक में नाच की क्या क्या प्रोग्रेशन हुई है, उसका लर्निंग कर्व कैसा हुआ है, उसमें इनोवेशन क्या क्या हुआ है. दैट इज वन थिंग. अनदर इम्पोर्टेंट थिंग इज, which I thought was quite an empowering thing, was that since every artist, be it traditional or be it folk artist, I know many folk artists from the rural part of Marathwada who also have started doing something online, like they present their Powada or their abhangs and evening time, and then they announce kal hum ye prastut karne ja rahe hain. So they have their own viewers now, and they are being followed by people. In a way, it is empowering for them, because who wants to listen to all these people, all these voices? There is some kind of democracy of ideas now, democracy in representation of ideas. All these years, there was this Delhi thing was like the most important city as far as patronage is concerned. And I mean, Ashokji, I'm thankful to you also, because in the beginning you introduced and you said all from different cities and not Delhi. So I remember that years ago, like 20 years ago or so, everyone used to say कि कुछ भी करना है ना दिल्ली जाके कर दिया, दिल्ली जाके कर दिया. You know, you must go to Delhi and get this thing done. There has been now for the younger generation, I'm very happy that they know how to express their ideas. There is a digital space for them. I'm not saying it is as good as or it is a replacement to what the spaces that we had earlier and which we of course will have in future, but there is a kind of democracy, a democratic way of working now. There is more respect and recognition for each voice. That is one thing I realized. Another thing was all these years performing artists were usually interested in performing in the theaters or in the performance spaces. We were not considering the screens. So many of us were not so much into films, working for the films or working for a project or something. And even if they worked, it had its own niche viewership. It was not a content that was accessible to so many people to view. What has happened in the past 1.5 years is that there are these lay people who are now aware what is Mohiniyattam, what is Kathakali, what is Kathak. Yesterday I saw this, yesterday I saw, because there's a lot of information that is accessible to them. So that is an advantage towards building an audience, an awakened audience, or at least an informed audience to begin with. Now people cannot say that I don't know this because I've not seen that. Now there is at least there is an access to see all that. Another thing, dancers, they themselves have entered the digital space. So people are finding traditional dancers more interesting to watch compared to the cinema dances and other kinds of dances which we always felt were not the right representation of our dance forms. So that is also an interesting shift. Like I come across normal engineering students or students of physiotherapy or school students. They watch something and they feel that this is looking better. I like the wrist movement. I like the subtle griva movement. It was looking so magical and so interesting. So we are in a way also educating audiences or maybe the society. Now my observation has been there are few organizations in India that draw a lot of funds only in the name of promotion and awareness of traditional dance and music. So I have a feeling now these organizations can now start patronizing musicians or projects that look at building newer work which is more relevant for now, and it should be more inclusive in the sense that it includes all different voices and all different paramparas. Let us not continue making a policy to only patronize awareness. I always keep questioning that भारत को अगर 75 साल आजादी के हो गए, हम अभी भी अवेयरनेस ही क्यों कर रहे हैं? Why can't we step a little further और कुछ और करें, कुछ और बताएं? अभी भी we sort of feel that we are doing a great job by only generating awareness. एक साल के अंदर I think digital awareness सबको आ गया. So 75 साल में traditional art forms की awareness क्यों नहीं पहुंच पाई? Did we do a sort of an assessment of how we were handling the programs or how we were doing it? Were those workshops useful? Were those lecture demonstrations useful? So digital medium has suddenly challenged all these things. So you have digital spaces of each artist. You have digital spaces owned by the folk artists or the artists living in villages, and you have digital spaces of the organizations or larger institutions. And sometimes it's these smaller voices that are heard with more attention and more interest compared to the more organized ones. So this is also very empowering for artists, and maybe in future they should take this further. They should look at what is the potential that lies in this whole now, the new normal or the new now. And as I said earlier, dance needs to have its representation in 5 zones. One is the skill, one is service, innovation, knowledge, and leadership. Unfortunately, we were paying more attention to skill and service. So when I say service, it's the showcase and performances and doing all these little services to the education sector or wherever. But we have a bigger role to play with respect to knowledge, with respect to innovation, with respect to leadership. And this pandemic has also taught us that we need to have a united voice also, and we need to find leadership in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think with that, we come to the end of the session. I think it has yielded very interesting, positive, encouraging, empowering insights about the situation, about the possibility and challenges that dance faces, and the many creative and critical ways in which it could cope with the changed scenario. We are very grateful, Leela ji, Sharmila ji, Shama ji, and Parwati ji, for this very, very interesting conversation. And thank you very much. We continue to hope that you would continue to oblige Raza Foundation in its effort to disseminate critical knowledge, to use a term from Parvati, about the arts. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Yes.
Namaskar. We just finished in time.